Hi, my name is Erika, I'm a knitter from Brazil, and you are watching the final video from my Everything I Ever Knitted series, every gift I ever knitted. So, my folks, the reason I left this video for last is because we have 19 gifts to talk about. So, I have grouped them in 3 categories. I have my old phone here to read from it, so that's why I'm using the microphone in the main phone today. We will have to do with only one sound and video recording. We have a special video today. I also don't have any props because since it is gift knitting, all these projects are already with their owners. Although some of them are here at my home because they are with my mother and sisters and my brother, but I didn't want to ask for them to find the stuff, so I will put old pictures here for you to see, but everything will be illustrated properly in the editing process. I'm surprised that it took me the entire month to actually talk about everything I ever knitted before this year, but it was 3 years of knitting, right? So that's okay. The details of every project I will place in the screen together with the picture, and I will talk about them more broadly. I also thought that it was interesting to leave for last this video because it can double down as a recommendation for the gifting season that is ahead. We are in November, so people give Christmas gifts, so maybe this is a good moment to share my experience with knitting gifts and maybe a feedback from patterns that I have actually knitted. Although I have to say that most of the projects today didn't use a pattern. Many were self-drafted, either because I was barely starting to knit or because people wanted specific things, but for the ones that weren't, I will leave the links below. The ones that I did self-draft, I can share a little bit about what I did to self-draft it, because I did it as a beginner knitter most of the time, so any beginner knitting that is watching this can do the same. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Well, the very first section of today's video is named Scarves, and that comes with a little bit of storytelling too, because I started, as many people do, with garter stitch scarf. Those famous long strips of garter stitch in which we fumble with the needles and produce wobbly stuff. It either makes us love knitting or it makes us hate it. And in my case, maybe because of the moment, I ended up loving it. The situation is as follows. The first time I ever picked knitting needles was when I was about 15 years. My mom, she crafts casually, very casually. So back then she picked some knitting needles and I decided to learn from her how to knit. She taught me the first steps, and I then decided I was going to make myself a Harry Potter scarf. It was about 2008, I believe. I was a teenager and I loved Harry Potter, and I wanted a Gryffindor scarf for myself. And I promised my then friends from high school that I was going to knit each of them a scarf as well. Needless to say, I didn't finish even my own scarf. My mom picked and finished it for me, so I had it for several years. I misplaced it and I have moved houses a few times in my life, so I don't know where it is. I think we don't have it anymore. I had this, but I never made my friends their scarves that I had promised. But I'm a person that likes to keep her promises. So when we were in 2021, and you know very well what was happening back then to everybody, and we were stuck at home, I, as many other people, picked up knitting. My mom did it, my little sister picked up knitting as well. Then I decided, why not, right? Let me join them. And I did. And then I thought to myself, I will fulfill the promise that I made for my friends. I'm still friends with them. I believe they didn't remember anymore, but I did. So the first scarf I knitted was a garter one. This one in 7mm needles, and it took me a little over 2 weeks, or a little under 2 weeks, to finish it. Motivated by that, I decided I was going to make another for another friend. And I also really love to learn stuff. So in the second, I decided to learn the pearl stitch, and I made it entirely in 1x1 ribbon. If you watched my videos before, you know that back then I twisted my stitch. So many of the projects that you're going to see today are with the stitches twisted. Just a heads up. But anyway, I made 1x1 ribbon here. I think it's half twisted ribbon. And then I delivered her this one. It took me a little longer, also in 7mm needles, but it took me like 1.5 months about that. The third one, I decided to use the recommended needles from the yarn, which were 4 and 5 millimeter. So I picked up a 4 millimeter needles and I decided to make it in 2x2 ribbon, and this one took me almost 5 months. I think this was the most pretty of the bunch. This is the one, the color is very pretty, my friend liked it. Then I departed to make the one for the fourth friend, which happens to be my best friend, and I have left her for less because I figured I would have more practice then. And I decided to learn something else again. I wanted to make her this one in seed stitch. However, it did not work. I picked up back the 7 millimeter needles, I worked on it, but it was very skewed, and seed stitch and me were enemies back then, in that moment. So I ended up delaying knitting it the entirety of 2022, because by then it was already 2022. Prior to that, I was knitting them mostly. I finish one, I start another, I finish one, and I wasn't knitting every day how I do today. I was knitting eventually when I felt like it. So it took me from February to December of 2022 to knit that scarf, and I made it a couple times. So the name of the project on Ravelry is the Scarf of Many Attempts, and in the end I settled for 1x1 rib in 10 millimeter needles. It turned out a pretty scarf in green, very beautiful green. The pictures are not great, but here in this meanwhile, in 2022, however, I needed other things, and that's why, well, we're going to transition to the second section of this video. But the last scarf that I knitted was for my boyfriend, because we started dating in 2022. So the first time we met, I gave him this scarf. For the first time I used a pattern from Ship and Stitch. I will leave the link below. It was a Harry Potter scarf, but I used it only because I needed to know how to make the stripes, how to change colors. I think I knitted it on 5 millimeter, but I didn't follow the pattern precisely. I didn't follow the pattern from the start. I only made what I was making for the other scarves, then I used the pattern to change colors. And it took me 2 months, about 2 months to knit it. It's a very cute one. And then let me transition to the next section, which is my boyfriend and his mom. So me and my boyfriend, we met online, started dating long distance, and every time we were going to meet, I would give him something. But I was still a very beginner knitter. Back then, I didn't know Ravelry, understand Ravelry. I didn't know much of knitting, to be honest. So I still was using the tutorials, video tutorials from Portuguese-speaking ladies with whom I learned how to knit, actually. Great people. And I didn't know how to knit in the round. Knitting in the round was a taboo for me for a long time. So you will see that many of these first projects of mine were knitted flat. I started knitting in the round with a gift as well, but it was a little later. I even bought a few not very good fixed circulars, but I wasn't able to cast on properly. So I decided to find a beanie that was knitted flat, and I did. And I knitted this beanie, striped. The original doesn't even have stripes. It's built with changing texture. You start with ribbon, then stockinette, reverse stockinette, then you alternate those strips of texture. And I decided to alternate the color as well, which I knew how to do because of the scarf. And I used the same yarn that I had used for his scarf, the scraps I used to make the beanie, so he would have a set. It was cute back then. I wouldn't knit a beanie like that anymore, I think, but it worked. And it was pretty warm, came in handy when we met because it was winter time. So the next time when I was going to his house, I decided to make a couple things to his mom. And I resorted to a Brazilian tutorial as well, to Blog by Dye. His mom likes pink. Then I bought some pink velvety yarn and knitted her a headband. And I didn't know even how to sew mattress stitch properly. So when I finished the headband, I couldn't sew properly, and I just stuck my needle through it and put it together, and it became, you know, those gathered headbands that come thick and then they get thin here because it's joined like that. That's how the headband turned out. It's good for, you know, making your makeup and everything. And to match, I actually probably made the cardigan first and the headband only with the scraps. I still have a little bit of scraps from that project, but it was again a flat rectangle that I then seamed. Then I learned to seam properly. You seam and then you create kind of a slouchy cardigan. I will place a picture here of how it is. I will place a picture of the pattern I based myself on. It was my first garment, completely shapeless. I was very proud because, you know, a garment. And I think she liked it, but where she lives, there's not much opportunity to wear very warm garments, and velvet yarn is pretty warm. I have to knit something else with shaping now for her. As I mentioned, I made of this a tradition, and I have made other things for him. I've already shown Plod, the African flower triceratops, in my crochet video. Here it is. You can see the video above. By the way, there are other gifts, many gifts in my crochet video too. Here is only the knitting. But Plod was one of the last ones. Before that, I think the next ones that I made were some decor. And I made a lot of preparation for that because my goal was to knit him a double knitted wall hanging that had in one side the Gates of Moria and the other side the Tree of Gondor, both from the Lord of the Rings, these ones. And I did that, but first, to prepare for that, I knitted his mom a couple pot holders with a ballerina, white and pink, in cotton. I think this is sport weight cotton, more like a recycled cotton. And the idea with those projects was to learn how to knit charts because I didn't know them. I learned it, it was alright. The drawing was made with texture, changing texture. Then for him, I made also a pot holder, but he uses this as a mug rug in double knitting, and one side is white, another side is black. The same yarn, the same Eurohoma yarn, which is recycled cotton with other fibers. And you can see that it's not perfect because of the places I placed the stitch markers. They created some gaps, but it was pretty nice. The selvages weren't great here, but it works and he uses it very well. And the cat's very cute. He likes cats. His mom likes ballerinas. The drawings weren't random. Once I have conquered those two tasks, I stepped into making the one from Lord of the Rings, which was my goal. All three of these patterns are free patterns on Ravelry. However, the Lord of the Rings one is only the irregular double knitting chart. Charts for this kind of project are a little bit different. They work with 4 colors because you're working with 2. But in some fields of the chart, you're going to knit both sides with the same color and both sides with the other color, and right side with one color, wrong side with the other, and vice versa. So you have to have colors that indicate each of these situations, because you have actually, in this case, 2 charts overlapping. Irregular double knitting, you create 2 different drawings, one in each side of your work. That's why it's a little bit more challenging, but nothing impossible at all. I was a very much beginner, a daring beginner, a bold beginner, but still a beginner when I made that, and I managed to make it. Of course, there must be some spots in which I crossed the colors wrongly, but overall it looks exactly as it was supposed to look. I still didn't figure out a good way to make the selvage, but I figured alright the ways to cast on and cast off for it. As I said, I had to make a little more prep work in this case because I wanted to transform it into something else. The chart is quite bare bones. I had to calculate beforehand how much space I wanted to leave in the edges and the selvage stitches, and I had to add all of that. I have detailed my process in my notes. If you are interested in making this decor, since it's a chart, I have seen people making even blankets with this one. I used very thin yarn and small needles so I could get the small thing. I think the wall hanger is like this size maybe, but you can make huge projects with it. And if you have a Lord of the Rings fan in your family, friends, significant other, well, you can make this one. I have used barbecue sticks to fix it in the top and the bottom, and I have sewn a little bit at the edges so it won't move like that, and I have created a cord to hang it at the wall. All the steps are in my project that I will leave below. I really like that project. I enjoy double knitting very much. I want to make double knitting again. I have tried before, but my head wasn't in the project that I tried, so I ripped it out, and maybe I will do it someday in the future again. After that, I made him a pair of socks, exactly like my own socks, my I'm So Basic socks. Actually, not exactly. They have the opposite colors because I bought two skins and I made two pairs of socks with the skins. So mine have beige feet and just black toes and cuffs and heels, and his have black feet with beige cuffs, toes, heels. Without saying to him what was the color combination for, I just showed him the two possibilities and said, which one do you think is more pretty? And he picked the black one, the black feet, so I made the black for him and the beige for me. I made mine first to learn in them, and then I made his. I used actually the same size. I only increased it half a millimeter in needle size, and I made the medium for both of us, and both fit very nicely. That pattern is great. I'm really not a sock knitter, but I still want to knit more socks for me and for my family, so I'm probably going to default to that pattern ever. And if you want to hear more about my experience, I will leave the link for my accessory videos above and below. Apart from that, I think the last thing I made for him that I haven't mentioned it before was this little heart. Just to keep the tradition, I decided to make it one day, and it was also something that taught me a different skill because it was the only project I ever worked with double pointed needles. I think I made it in one afternoon. It was pretty easy as long as you follow it step by step. There's no mystery, and it turns out very cute. And then I used the same golden yarn from the Lord of the Rings wall hanging. I picked a little bit of the golden yarn I have left, and I made a hanging for the little heart as well. And yes, I think this is it for this section. Let's go then to my final section, which is the things I made for my family. I have to preface that by saying that I have more things that I made for my family in the crochet video. I have a lunch set I made for my grandma, and then a few bandanas I made for my sister, and a top I made for my sister, both for my little sister, and this vest, which was mine from the vintage video. I gave this for my second sister because it flatters her color palette. She's a soft autumn, so she wears that one, it's hers. And other than that, I have made a vest for my grandma, this green one. And if you want to hear about the vests I made for my grandma, you better look for one of my podcast episodes in which I talked more about it. I think it was the 9th or the 8th, but I will leave the link below. Also, last thing, I made two beanies for my brother. I will talk about one, but the other one, I have fixed it this year. It's in my Fix It February, so I will also leave the link for that. It's named Short Fisherman Toque. I gave him for his birthday in July 2023. This one, originally it was this green. He picked the pattern, he picked the colorway, but the color was different from the picture. The pattern wasn't great in explaining the decreases, so I had to modify the decreases. All the details for that are in my project notes. Okay, this said, I have 4 projects to talk about. And the first was my second ever garment and my first shaped garment, this vest. Well, the reason why I have this one is because I'm the person who's wearing it now. It was a still self-drafted project, knitted in panels and seamed, and it was the first ever project in which I worked with wool. This is entirely merino wool. I love this project to death. I sometimes think, since I'm wearing it today and I couldn't make a vest for my mom in the size she is now with the yardage I have, because I bought a very strict quantity. Actually, I wanted to make her a sweater, but I didn't know how much yarn goes into a set sweater. When it came here, it had to become a vest. I could make it a little shorter and then maybe add texture or something, because it's a little long for myself. Here's a picture. I sometimes think about unraveling and knitting into something else, but let's see. The twisted stitches, it was the curse of my early years, but the process of self-drafting it was quite easy. I followed some tips by Kika, her video about 10 tips to be a better knitter, or something like that. I didn't watch back then the knitting podcasts. I was watching technique videos or videos that talked about mistakes to avoid, how to be a better knitter, that kind of thing. Many yarn reviews as well. I decided also to use the needles recommended by the yarn, which were for me. I think that today I would knit it in larger needles because this is the case. I knitted very tightly. I don't mind the tight gauge. However, I also wouldn't mind if I would knit it in a larger gauge and get more from this yardage, you know. My knitting became looser and I have come to appreciate looser gauge drapier garments, so to say, harder drapier fabrics. So simply I created two rectangles, bottom up of course, when I had enough length here, according to the garment by her that I measured to use as model. When I got here, I found a pattern from Knitty, free pattern, called Leftovers, and I based myself on that pattern to create the shaping and create the borders too. The ribbon was different, was a different rate, the numbers were different, but I adapted. I made the calculations according to my gauge and the size I had here and all that jazz, and I got this pretty nice vest. I bought the yarn when I first got excited with knitting and I wanted to do more, and I wanted to knit a proper garment and give my mom a proper garment as well, because she really gets very cold in winter. She doesn't like cold weather, so I wanted to keep her very warm with actual wool. So I was very excited, but it took me a little while to start and even more to finish, right? And also while I was knitting this one, I started my first ever sweater, which was scrap yarn sweater. I made it with the scraps from all my scarves, all the previous projects. So you can see by the appearance how it joins variegated yarn with, you know, and I added some scraps from the projects that my mom and my sister were also knitting. I picked really all the scraps that were at home. Scraps of acrylic, of course. The green, it's my sister's favorite color, the aqua. And it was a scrap from her project, and the gray was a scrap from my mother's projects. I joined everything, and I knew I would need more yarn than that. In the end, I had to buy more of the aqua to finish the top part here, and I had to buy some more of the black as well for the sleeves and the collar, which were supposed to tie in the entire project. It was my first project in the round and it was a pleasant experience. It was the first time I noticed that I twisted my stitches, because as you know, when you knit flat and in the round in the same project, when you twist your stitches, you can see very strikingly the difference when you switch from knitting one way, in this case from knitting in the round, because I started bottom up in the round, to knitting flat. And that's when I noticed that, but I only solved it a little later. My sister wears it a lot. My first intention was to make it for myself, but before I started, even I gave up on that because I don't wear that many colors in the same outfit. My sister does. That's why I decided to make it for her, and that's why I decided to place the green here, because she likes it and all that jazz. And that was my first ever sweater. So many miles walked from that to where we are today, but it was nice to knit in those first moments because I wasn't tied to patterns. So even today, when I knit more from patterns, I know that I can just ditch them and knit the actual skills, which is, by the way, how people tend to learn how to knit in Brazil. We're not so tied to patterns as I see English language countries tend to be more tied to patterns. I think we have two more to talk about. Let's go then. So the last garment project that I made for my family was this coat, this cardigan, which I made for my sister, my middle sister, and she really loves it, and I made it to her for her birthday. I think it was 2023 as well. It was my second ever lace project and probably my first entirely lace / mesh project. Very simple lace. The stitches name it Irish mesh, and the pattern, I don't think it's free anymore. I hope the pattern is still available. If it is, I will leave the link below. Even if it's a paid pattern, maybe if you like the garment, you will still pay the pattern to make it. But when I made it, it was a free pattern on her blog, and there is a video tutorial for the cardigan, and there is a video tutorial for the stitch. The situation with this garment is that you can knit it with any gauge. She teaches the stitch and she teaches a formula, and you can knit it with a very thin gauge and you can knit it with a huge gauge. I liked the versions that were knitted in a thicker gauge. That's why I picked a very heavy yarn. This is bulky weight, mostly acrylic with a little bit of wool and a little bit of mohair. It's stunning. This yarn is stunning. It's a little bit itchy, I think, but it's good that it's a winter coat for her. Yes, very counterintuitive to use mesh for a winter coat, but actually it doesn't trouble her. She uses it on top of other layers and it warms her up a lot. I think the original is knitted in heavy cotton, but you can also find projects on Ravelry using the same pattern to knit in smaller gauges, worse and even fingering. I bought the quantity that she taught us to calculate in the pattern, but I ended up having to make the length of a larger cardigan for my sister. I calculated according to her measurements to make the first size, I think, or second, and bought yarn for that. The original is a little bit cropped, she didn't like that. It hits in the hip bone. My sister wanted a longer one. So accidentally I went into a case of yarn chicken, maybe the first of many, as you know if you follow me. I knitted it very quickly. The entire thing took me less than 1 month, except that I had then to buy the yarn, find a place that had that color because it was kind of a discontinued yarn. I didn't notice much difference in dye lot this time. I did notice some difference in dye lot when I bought more of the green yarn for my sister's scrap yarn sweater. If you know that it's there, you'll notice the dye lot difference, but it's a scrap yarn project anyway, so who cares? She doesn't care, so I don't too. But in this one there wasn't a lot difference, so it just delayed me a little bit to finish the project. But when I finished it, she loved it. She wears it a lot all winter round. People in her work love it, and that was a success. And she of course already asked for another. She said, I want the next one to be lilac. I said, then I will teach you to knit. Well, I think that's it. The last project I have to talk about was my first cable project, the Jason's Cashmere hat for my brother. No, it wasn't. But my second was this hat, which is very popular on Ravelry. It's one of the most popular in Hot right now. For a reason, it's very easy and very accommodating and good. I'm not sure that it has the best fit for him too. My brother is tall and broad-shouldered, and his other measures are equivalent, but it was quite easy to knit and a very good project if you have little yarn. I think this is so classic that it will fit anyone, like male, female, everyone. It fits everyone. I think it's only one size, and I don't think I have much to talk about. I have dropped some stitches in the cable and it was a little troublesome to fix it, but I ended up doing it, stretching and blocking, kinda disguised that spot. Not completely, I can still notice that, but in the head it doesn't show up so much. And I also have placed a small tag of fake leather to hide the beginning. I made it to both of his toques, which looks nice for a man's beanie. And that's it. Let me just do the outro then. So everyone, as you may have noticed today, I just blabbed a lot. I hope this won't give me much more trouble in editing, but I will try to place in the screen the essential data so that you can watch this video and come out of it with the essential data about this project in case you want to reproduce any of them. I didn't come with notes as I usually come for this kind of video, but I wanted to be more free today, and I hope you like it. I hope you will find inspiration here. You will find here something that will be useful for you. And if you're new, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. This is the 7th of a series of videos about everything I knitted prior to starting the channel. That is, prior to this year. So if you haven't watched my other videos, you can go to my playlist. I will leave the link below. You can also watch the podcasts I made this year, so you will see what I knitted this year. Some things were much finer, not only in gauge. My skill has developed over the years, so you might enjoy following my journey over the past year or from now on. I want to make a balance. I don't know still if I will make it of everything I ever knit or only of this year. I want to make some charts and some more analytic video for recap, because I don't want to make everything I knitted this year. You know, I may talk too much if I do that, but an analytic video might come our way still this year, the beginning of the next, I don't know. And I think that's it for now, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, be happy, be healthy, happy knitting. Bye bye.